So let's talk about reasons for optimism, and let me get my PowerPoint fired up here. Uh, Sorry, just a second. All right, you all seeing that slide? Okay. So I missed the February meeting of this committee. Sorry about that. And the meeting before that was January 10th, about a week and a half before the inauguration. I will try to keep my personal views out of this. I suspect a lot of us see eye to eye on a lot of things, but it's safe to say that a lot has happened since January 20th. And that day, when the DMI Transportation Committee met, we started talking about this reasons for optimism theme. And after checking with Jason and Stephanie a couple of weeks ago, we decided to stick with that theme. The point of this talk is not to gloss over the seriousness of what's going on or the uncertainty about what's coming next. But instead, as I thought about it, it's to show determination and to use Madison's hope of getting passenger rail as a kind of case study. Um, even for this project, which even before the inauguration and the election last year, even then this had no guarantee. Th There are ways forward, and yes, reasons for optimism, even in this chaotic environment that we've seen since then. Anything, if I get anything wrong today, that's on me. But some of those reasons for optimism are thanks to all the people who are doing great work on this, such as in the city of Madison. I saw Liz Callan on here. She's doing just terrific work to make this happen. Others at HNTB and WISDOT are working every day to make this happen. And that work is happening in a broader context, of course. And to understand Madison's chances of finally getting passenger rail, we need to look at this environment from the national level on down. So that's part of what I'll be doing today. But first, and this, speaking of that national context, this optimistic photo that you see here is from the groundbreaking last April, at the end of last April, for the Brightline West high-speed rail line that is being built. It is under construction between Las Vegas and the LA area. That will be a 200 mile an hour electrified high-speed line. And the plan is for it to connect up with California's line that they're building between LA and San Francisco. So there's not one, there are two high-speed lines under construction in the United States right now. So that's part of the national context. But for us here in Wisconsin, what's on the table? If I'll ask you to, even though it's, they're obviously there, please kind of tune out the gray parts of the map, the gray lines in the map. That's for the future. But let's talk about a couple of the other lines. The black or dark blue line shows current service in Wisconsin. So between Chicago and Milwaukee, just to quickly review, we've got 7 trains a day, 7 round trips a day. A train called the Hiawatha that's been running there for many years. That's part of service in Wisconsin. Once a day in each direction, there's a long distance train that runs from Chicago through Wisconsin all the way to the Pacific Northwest and back. And then since the end of last May, we've had a new train called the Borealis running between Chicago and the Twin Cities. Along this line, unfortunately, it doesn't come through Madison, but it gets pretty close in Columbus here and then goes through La Crosse and up along the Mississippi up to the Twin Cities. So that's what we've got right now. The colored lines, the wider lines here show proposed new or improved service. There's a proposal for more Hiawatha trips, taking that number up from 7 trips a day to 10. That's one of Wisconsin. Wisconsin has 5 projects in the works right now. The Another one is to just have another Borealis frequency between Chicago and the Twin Cities, and then also to begin new service between Milwaukee and Green Bay through the Fox Cities, coming over to Madison, and then getting up onto one or another of these options for going west. Service to Eau Claire and other communities along the way. And then Eau Claire County itself got a federal grant to work on more frequent service just between Eau Claire and the Twin Cities. And speaking of our friends and neighbors in Minnesota, Minnesota also has a project to run a rail line north, or to establish a rail line north from Minneapolis to Duluth, and it would serve Superior along the way. So that's more potential good news for Wisconsin. So that's sort of what's in the works right now, or at an early stage, but that's what's in the works on the table. These projects are all on a path that were created by the bipartisan infrastructure law that passed in 2021, and that path has 6 steps. All of Wisconsin's projects right now, including Madison's, are in step one. So over here, which is basically kind of scoping the work out. And as of this morning, as far as I know, that path is still there. It could, I suppose the whole, with what we've seen over the last few weeks, the whole bipartisan infrastructure law could be repealed or replaced, but there's a decent chance that this path is going to stay in place until at least 2026 or 2027. That's because the bipolar law that passed in 2021 was essentially every 5 years there's a process called reauthorization for transportation funding. This was the previous reauthorization. It's due to last until the end of 2026, and sometimes it takes a little bit longer. So it could be that this will just stay in place during the at least the rest of that time. There has been some turbulence along the way. The Federal Railroad Administration, as I understand it, was affected by the sort of firings or layoffs of all the of probationary hires at the federal level. They had been staffing up to support work like this, and it's my understanding, though, I don't claim to know, where this stands in the courts right now, but they, are in danger of losing people or have lost people just because of those mass firings. And that's bad news. But alongside that, so far there has been no outright attack on Amtrak or on the FRA, the Federal Railroad Administration itself, like we've seen for some other agencies. So that's the current state of things. Um, it's not though that, or I mean, at first I couldn't help but wonder if they just hadn't gotten around to attacking passenger rail, but it's not that no one has given it a thought in these 6 or 7 weeks since the inauguration. A few weeks back, Donald Trump began attacking California's high-speed rail project, or maybe it'd be better to say that he resumed those attacks because that was a familiar theme during his first term in the Oval Office. He said a bunch of things about the California project that just weren't true. And then the new Secretary of the U.S. Department of Transportation, Sean Duffy, fellow Wisconsinite, he picked up that theme and made it more formal by actually traveling to LA to give a press conference in which he launched a review of California's high-speed rail spending. Um, it's because this has been such a theme, you could be forgiven for thinking that what they're going to find is a foregone conclusion. But anyway, that got underway. He kicked that off that so-called review a few weeks ago in LA. One of the interesting things about that event that he organized at LA's Union Station was that there was pushback. There was a big crowd of protesters uh, pushing back against what he was saying and basically saying, build this train line, this high-speed line. So that was interesting. And then also significant, I think, was the fact that Secretary Duffy praised the private Brightline West high-speed rail project. So it's not, at least as far as we've seen, it's not that there's just a sort of blanket condemnation of high-speed rail. He did have positive things to say about that Brightline project, so I thought that was good. Meanwhile, Amtrak has taken another step on a high-speed rail project of theirs, looking for a delivery partner for a proposed high-speed line between Houston and Dallas. I don't know, but I would suspect that they probably ran this by somebody before making this announcement, or at the very least, after they made the announcement, some axe did not fall on this project, so they are continuing to move forward with this. I thought that was a positive sign. And then alongside these projects in places like Texas and out west, there are dozens of projects all over the country that got underway thanks to support from the bipartisan infrastructure law. In late 2023, the FRA awarded grants to 69 projects in 44 states. Five of those projects, plus the one in Minnesota, were among those. And starting work on new and improved service in so many places was good on the merits, but it was also politically smart because if anybody tries to pull the rug out from under what's gotten started, I think that means there are going to be frustrated people in a lot of states and a lot of congressional districts. So hopefully that provides some measure of protection and insurance that there's a way to keep moving these projects forward. Congress has shown some signs of pushing back against these attempts to withhold federal funding, and locally here, Senator Baldwin has been instrumental in getting some important support for the work in Wisconsin. She helped to bring in grants for work on a rail yard in the Milwaukee area called the Muskego Yard. Getting passenger trains running to places like Madison, it really depends on improving the situation in that rail yard. So she's been helpful with that, and she also got a grant to support the continued operation of that Borealis train between Chicago and the Twin Cities. The funding for that has been caught up in this attempt to withhold federal funds, but her office said not too long ago that they believe that, of course, they believe that the funds should be released and that they're closely watching that. So that's still in play. But that, just wanted to give you that update. Um, any attempt to interfere with projects that are being supported by the infrastructure law is essentially defying Congress. And some more good news is that rail has supporters in Congress on both sides of the aisle. If you've followed this through the years, or even if you haven't followed it closely, you may have seen over the last several decades there have been really pretty consistent and regular efforts by some in Congress to kill off Amtrak, to remove its funding, to just sort of get rid of the agency, and yet it has kept rolling along. Shouldn't take that for granted, especially now, but that is it's a good sign, I think, that after so many attacks, Amtrak has come through it and is actually doing well. They've come through it, and they've got lots of work to do, but they've laid foundations for a bigger, better future. And again, while I'm trying not to take anything for granted at this point, the programs, the federal programs that Madison's effort and others rely on have friends in high places. This news release that's on the screen right now it's about 9 years ago, but the national organization, the Rail Passengers Association, gave what they call their Golden Spike Award to Senator John Thune, who is now, of course, the Senate Majority Leader. They gave him this award for the role that he played in a previous round of funding that supported passenger rail. So again, don't take anything for granted, but that there are supporters of passenger rail on both sides of the aisle. So let's come back to this path. We've got the path forward. We've still got the path forward for Madison's project and others, but what about the money? The step that these projects are in right now, step one, came with 100% federal funding, so that was good news. Step two, WISDOT says that they plan to be ready to move all of the Wisconsin projects into step two by the end of this year. The things get a little more financially challenging for that, in that the way that it's supposed to work is that 90% of the funds can come from the federal government, and then 10%, this 10% here, would need to come from some non-federal source. Usually that means from the state. To do that, the Evers administration has said that it's committed to moving. Whoops, sorry. The Evers administration has said that they are committed to moving these projects forward, and you can see it in the governor's budget proposal that he put out a few weeks ago. In that budget proposal, there is a total over 2 years of $15 million for to support those trains that are currently running in Wisconsin and to continue the ongoing studies for expansion. Getting this money from the state, getting the state legislature to sign off on this, of course, is an uphill journey, but it always was. So that's not different. And it's sort of like the struggles of Amtrak over time. For many years here in Wisconsin too. Though it's always an uphill struggle, there's always been just enough for the trains that we've had running. There's been consistent investment by Wisconsin for decades now in that Hiawatha train between Chicago and Milwaukee. And the current budget that we're in provided just barely enough money for Wisconsin's contribution toward getting that Borealis train started between Chicago and the Twin Cities. And that support has been bipartisan, sometimes not by not as much as we would like, but there's bipartisan support for this in Wisconsin as well. And some more good news is that it's getting easier to make the case for more investment in passenger rail across the country and here in Wisconsin. That Hiawatha train between Chicago and Milwaukee has a consistently good track record, both in terms of the ridership, which is strong, and the return on investment. It's actually one of the most successful Amtrak trains in the whole country. And the new Borealis train has really exceeded ridership expectations. It was initially projected to carry, I believe the number is 155,000 people a year. It hit the 160,000 mark after just its first 8 months. So the ridership is actually running about 50% over what it was projected. And incidentally, this photo here on the right, I took this photo a few months ago in Columbus, one of the stations that's relatively close to Madison. It happened to be a moment when one of the eastbound long distance trains from the West Coast was coming in at the same time that the red train there, the Borealis, was heading west. And I should have, taken a picture. I focused on the trains, but I should have taken a picture of the people because I was shocked that there was a crowd of people. There were dozens of people waiting for the train in Little Columbus, population 5,000. If any of you have ever been there before, especially before the Borealis started running, it was pretty sleepy at that station. You might be the only person waiting there, or maybe there'd be one or two other people waiting there. Now, there are many more, and on a Friday seems to be one of the busier travel days. There can be dozens of people like there were the day that I happened to take this picture. Um, and to move beyond these anecdotes, let's put some numbers on this. Wisconsin has, or Amtrak has 8 passenger rail stations in Wisconsin, in Sturtevant at the Milwaukee Airport, in downtown Milwaukee, at Columbus, in that photo there on the right, in Portage, the Dells, Toma, and La Crosse. And last year, Amtrak's trains carried more than 1 million passengers to and from those stations just in Wisconsin. So, we're talking about significant ridership right here in Wisconsin. So that I think that's another thing that we have going for us. Lots of people are using this train, more people than projected, or these trains, more people than projected, especially for the Borealis. Now, $15 million in the budget, of course, that's real money, but it's a comparatively small amount of money compared to what we routinely spend on highways. This pie chart shows transportation funding in the budget, the biennial budget that we're currently in. And as you can see from that big blue segment of the pie over there on the right, we're spending more than $4 billion over that 2-year period on highways. So, compared to $4 billion, 15 million, that's really not all that much. And even if, I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but even if the bipartisan infrastructure law and the funding mechanism that it is supposed to provide were to go away and states had to shoulder this load by themselves, we'd still be talking, compared to highway spending, state highway spending, we'd still be talking about relatively small expenditures for passenger rail. There is also, I said a little bit about the private company Brightline, and there are other companies in the private sector that are interested in passenger rail. including the idea of night trains. And this map comes from a company. It's a startup called Luna Train, and what they are looking at is running passenger trains at night, so that essentially maybe you get on in a city like Chicago late in the evening, and you kind of wake up in your destination city like Denver or whatever. Um, it's relatively easy to draw lines on a map like this. So, this is at a very early stage, and lots of things have to line up and go right to make something like this happen. But I think it's interesting and encouraging that more private companies are showing interest in service like this. And one of the lines, one of the reasons that I wanted to talk briefly about Luna Train is that they've got Wisconsin on their map. There is that line between Chicago and Minneapolis. Where exactly does it go? The line, doesn't provide a lot of detail. Does it go through Madison? Probably it would not at this point be, or could not at this point because the tracks to Madison are not in good enough shape. But stay tuned. Hopefully we'll be continuing to move forward on things like this. There's also interest and a lot going on in neighboring states like Illinois. Since the last time that you all gave me a chance to give a presentation, the state of Illinois, which has an actual high-speed rail commission, they have started a serious engineering study to look at building a high-speed line, 200 mile an hour electrified line between Chicago and St. Louis. So that's at an early stage, but that work is underway. There is also legislation that's been introduced in Illinois to give IDOT, their Department of Transportation, more resources to work on passenger rail and to kind of expand the scope of what IDOT does. What the organization that I work for, the High Speed Rail Alliance, we of course advocate for a much broader and more ambitious rail network, a statewide rail plan for Illinois, for Wisconsin, for every state essentially. And that's what this map shows, a vision for a statewide rail network. But the proposal here uh, goes beyond the borders of Illinois, and you can see that there is a yellow line that reaches northwest from Chicago through Janesville to Madison, and that is actually on the radar in Illinois. A trip like that, it would require some work on the tracks that are there. But with a relatively modest investment, you could get trains running that could do that trip in 2 hours or less between Chicago and Madison. And though we're still at a very early stage, and this document here that I've got on the right is a bill. It hasn't passed yet, but there is an actual bill that has been introduced in the Illinois legislature that would allocate $10 million just to look at the possibility of service between Chicago and Madison. So our friends and neighbors in Illinois are on this, and naturally, my organization, the High Speed Rail Alliance, is very supportive of this. And rail advocates are at work here in Wisconsin as well. Just last week, a group of groups had a passenger rail advocacy day at the Capitol, which included a news conference. That's what the photo on the left shows. The speakers from some groups, along with several state lawmakers who attended. We also had a briefing for anyone in the legislature or staff members who wanted to attend. And the good news there was that a few actual lawmakers did, and others sent staff. And in total, representatives from about 20% of the districts in Wisconsin came to that briefing about where things stand in passenger or for passenger rail in Wisconsin and the prospects for the future. And one of the attendees included one of our senators here from the Madison area, Senator Royce, in that photo on the right. And we're incidentally that the attendees from this group too were bipartisan, so that is another encouraging sign. And of course, we're planning next steps to keep this moving forward. And that this kind of work leads to what I think is one of the biggest reasons for optimism, which is that I think that one day, and maybe even sooner than you think, there's going to be a pro-rail majority in the Wisconsin legislature that can give Madison what we need to get trains running here. That doesn't mean that it's just going to happen, but the benefits of trains are really clear, and there are lawmakers on both sides of the aisle again who want this, and there are rail advocates who are working for it every day. We know, of course, from hard experience in Wisconsin 15 years ago that this isn't easy. But even for a project like this, and even now in these, these tumultuous times, there are ways to make it happen. So I hope that that gives you a sense of optimism for rail and other worthwhile projects that may be in a similar position to this one. And so, what we've got to do is stay in the game and figure this out in this new environment. So let me leave it there, but thank you.
All right, thanks, Chris. Does anyone have any questions? That was very informative, and I felt like it was very optimistic.
Good.
Yeah. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question. So I think the last time we heard from Chris and Liz, the timetable for a station in Madison was put at 2030, and maybe that was considered optimistic. Um, I just rode the Borealis yesterday and got off in Columbus, and like they're making improvements there, but it's still really antiquated, and it's pretty clear that many of the riders there, if not the vast majority, are coming from or going to Madison. Like, what is there anything on that list of steps that can be at all accelerated? Because understanding that even under the previous presidential administration, 2030 was seen as the well, as sort of the optimistic opening. Anything that can be sped up, and how, like, even in a perfect world, even with like investment beyond what we're hoping for now.
It comes down to political will, at least partly. And of course, we're working to build that political will. Uh, Inevitably, it's going to take time. Just even if the political will were there to get the tracks in a better state to be able to run passenger trains safely and at a reasonable speed, that would take some time. One thing that could help in the meantime, and WisDOT has been. Uh, I don't know if they've had the opportunity to really work on this yet, but they have said at least that they want to look at the possibility of an interim shuttle that would run between Madison and Columbus. The Amtrak runs shuttle buses like that from, cities that aren't connected to stations when in other parts of the country where needed. So yeah, Jason, I've seen what you've seen in Columbus. I've been one of those passengers myself, and there are a fair number of people now who are using it, and it is, yeah, of course we should have the station in Madison. So in the meantime, I hope that it would be possible to get that bus running, and then what we need is more. We've got to get things to line up politically to say, okay, let's go faster. 2030 is too far away. We can't let this drag on. We need this now.
Any
Anything?
other questions?
All right.
Jason, do you have anything to add on the DMI side?
No, thank you, Chris. And thank you to this committee. Obviously, 9 months ago or so, you all recommended the position that we host any potential station here in downtown near Monona Terrace. So that's what our board moved on. Obviously, we're waiting to hear more from the team, Liz and everyone at the city, but we're still very hopeful. And I just want to say a huge thanks to Chris. You've been a fantastic member of this committee and keeping us updated. So thank you. Thank you very much. And
Well,
thank you to Liz Cowan as well. Liz has been
yeah.
on this. Just an absolute pleasure to work with. So
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Liz, and thank you all for the chance to, share these updates and reasons for optimism.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Chris. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. We'll see you next month.
All right.
All right. Bye.